And so what I've learned is it's oftentimes not a matter of engaging in an argument, but flipping it around and making people realize the ugliness, showing disappointment, saying, oh my gosh, I would have never thought you'd say something like that, and then be quiet.
Today's episode is sponsored by EncourageX, where you can manage all of your encouragement needs in one place. Personal, authentic, and consistent. EncourageX.com, where relationships mean everything. I'm very excited to welcome our guest today, who is a social media and technology powerhouse. She's an author, she's a keynote speaker, she's a certified futurist. I can't wait to find out what that is, and so much more. Crystal Washington, it is delightful to have you here with us. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, of course. And we were just sitting here reminiscing about having known each other in different settings throughout the years and everything, and it's been so exciting for me to see how your career has transitioned from what you were doing earlier in the marketing and corporate sales and all the different things you have done. And now you've become this powerhouse of a speaker around the world talking about social media technology. Tell folks a little bit more about what you do and why you're so passionate about it.
Well, I love technology not because I'm in love with the hardware, the software, but because I love people. And I realize that technology enables us to be superhumans. It empowers us to touch people that 20, 30 years ago we had no way of touching. And so my focus when it comes to technology and even futurism is leveraging it, sometimes for sales and marketing from our more corporate clients, but also efficiency. But efficiency, we think of it more as a corporate term, but in our everyday lives, everyone feels overwhelmed. They feel like they're falling short. Working parents might feel like they're either suffering at work or not doing enough at home. So I love showing people how they can use this technology to extend themselves and not be controlled by the technology.
And so how do you do that? What would be your say your top 2 or 3 tips for how to do that?
Well, I think one of the things is before we use any piece of technology, thinking, what is our goal? Because most of the time we start to adopt things just because someone else told us it's the hot new thing, right? Mm-hmm. What are we trying to accomplish? If one of our major goals for the year is to spend more time with family, okay, then maybe you have a Facebook group that's a secret Facebook group where you're connected with all your family and that's where you share news. Mm-hmm. Maybe you don't get on the regular feed. Maybe you don't surf Instagram for random pictures of models, Right. It's just knowing the balance. Maybe you don't play those games on your phone. Mm-hmm. So when you have a goal in mind, it lets you know what you should and shouldn't be doing.
So you can monitor yourself in that way.
Right.
So you mentioned being a futurist. So
right.
What is a certified futurist and what is that movement, that futurist movement, all about?
So futurists are basically people that look at, everyone has basically an expected future. There's things that we expect to happen. Mm-hmm. A futurist job is to map out alternatives. If something else happens here, we collect data, and then we say, based on all this data, and we have to pick a very specific subject. It's not like we can create alternate realities for the entire world. We have to pick a topic, an industry, a very specific issue. And we map out maybe 3 alternatives. And we allow companies or individuals to plan for the alternatives. So for instance, Shell is one of the first companies that actually had an in-house futurist many, many years ago. And that's one of the reasons they've been able to stay ahead of many trends. So it's all it is planning for the future. It's something that our parents told us to do with savings and other things. If what you think might happen won't happen, have a plan B. Futurists just help the world have a plan B.
So do you use your skills as a certified futurist specifically related to the technology and social media worlds? Is that why you...
That's it.
That's it.
I don't go outside of that. So if someone needs a HR futurist or another area, I say that's not me. I focus on technology.
Right. And so, social media and technology, of course, through the ages, as it has progressed, it has changed the culture. And we are certainly witnessing that in the times that we're living in now. And one of the things that we talk about a lot on this podcast is about human connection.
Right.
And I was looking at one of your videos on your website, and you made a comment during one of your speeches that technology can never replace a face-to-face exchange. I want you to to preach on that for me,
Yeah.
please, because I think that is a core message and a core reason of why we are so divided, and we hide behind the anonymity of not having face-to-face connection and feel like you can say anything.
Right.
So please, tell us your take on this.
Well, I do believe technology can't replace face-to-face. It can't replace a handwritten note. It can't replace the human interaction. If that makes sense?
Yes.
And so I think it's a balance. There are times where we cannot connect with someone face-to-face. There might be someone we're connecting with in another country, or a family member that's far away that's just gone through surgery and we want to be there, and the only way we can be there is through FaceTime. That's okay. But at the end of the day, there's an energy transaction that happens when you're with people. And anyone that's watching us right now knows that there's some people that you can just have a 2-minute conversation and afterwards you feel refreshed and renewed. There's some people you can stand next to and not even talk to them. After 1 minute, you feel completely drained, right? No matter what, technology isn't going to replace that piece. And so when we want to build deeper connections, I'm a fan of, yes, it's okay to build relationships online. It's okay for those minor maintenances to happen online in between the face-to-face. But at the end of the day, there still comes a point where you have to have that human contact minus the technology.
Absolutely. I just think that's such an important point. Right before we started rolling the recording devices, we were talking about Facebook and some of the posts that, if you've not seen some of Crystal's posts on Facebook, you really should start following her, because you have such a unique perspective, I think, not only on technology and social media, but the world in general. And you've been very candid about sharing some of your experiences in life, in business, etc., and the reaction that people sometimes have to you. Share a little bit, if there's one or two stories that you can share about how people would come at you in a negative way and how you have dealt with that.
Right. Oh, I'm trying to, so I feel like that might be a 2-part question.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the online piece, I personally made a choice a long time ago that I was not just going to be a billboard for my business. That is no judgment on people who do. Some people say, you stick to the topic and you just brand. I get that. But at the end of the day, I also feel like my audiences connect with me because they can tell under all that tech talk, I genuinely care. I want each and every one of them to feel like, oh, I get it at the end, and use this technology in a better way, right? And so for that reason, I'll talk about racism, I'll talk about religion, I'll talk about politics. But where it comes in handy, my own personal belief systems, is that I won't say that I'm moderate, but just the way that I view the world, I tend to take a centrist viewpoint. Doesn't mean that I don't have strong opinions that sometimes slide in either direction, but it's been my experience as a speaker and speaking to audiences all over the world. So I've spoken in a room where everyone in there was a top-level director for a Fortune 100 company. I've spoken in rooms to farmers, okay? Because I see these varied viewpoints, what I understand is we all care about the same things. Our solutions to those things are what divide us, and our fear of the inevitable, what we feel like is coming for us, that's what divides us. And so when you're scared that this thing's going to happen, and the person over here is saying, no, not your way, my way, well, now you're fighting them because you're so scared of it happening. So when I post on social media, I tend to take an approach where, sometimes people can see my opinion, sometimes they can't. Sometimes I actually don't have an opinion. I'm like, let's just dive into this. This is scary, and we're all dealing with it. And so that's pretty much the approach that I take. Now, in my personal life, I will say that I'm also not afraid to have uncomfortable conversations and draw boundaries. And that comes across in my posts as well, because I encourage people to have boundaries in this time as well. Because I think that while we should come together, at the end of the day, there are some people that are abusive.
Yeah.
And so you can't kumbaya it out with someone who wants to punch you in the face, right? So
Exactly.
There's limits to this thing.
Yeah.
So I think about in my own life when I talk about difficult situations. I remember being in corporate America and working for a company where I had a boss who would talk about literal quotes, we should just kill all Muslims. Or he would, I remember in a sales meeting talking about one time, he was saying that black people should be proud of Aunt Jemima. And all of these moments, and I would always speak out, and I became known as, my nickname became PC. But whether it was about African Americans, Muslims, Mexican Americans came into the conversation.
So back up. Okay, back up. Oh, God, so much of what you said there. So let's take this most recent thing that you just said about a boss saying we should just kill all Muslims.
Right.
And you spoke up. And what did you say? How did you respond to that? How did you?
Well, he said it in the presence of another person who was a director in the company. And that person, I know, didn't agree with it. She looked uncomfortable. But again, I was the one who was most likely to voice. I knew she would just kind of go along with it. And I said, what an amazingly ugly thing to say. And I just looked at him. And then I watched him tap dance around what he just said until he became uncomfortable and changed the subject. And so what I've learned is it's oftentimes not a matter of engaging in an argument, but flipping it around and making people realize the ugliness, showing disappointment, saying, oh my gosh, I would have never thought you'd say something like that. And then be quiet. Because when people are uncomfortable, then it makes them start to examine. Because they can't be mad at you for saying that something they said was ugly. You didn't judge them, you didn't say they're a horrible person, you didn't debate. You just said, oh, how horrible.
I love that. That's something that a parent would do too.
Yeah.
Try to turn it around, and show the disappointment.
Mm-hmm.
That's a brilliant strategy. In your earlier comment, you talked about how so much of what is driving this divide is fear-based,
Mm-hmm.
and that is just it's such a powerful truth, I believe,
Mm-hmm.
that we fear what we don't know, we fear what we don't understand, we are afraid that we come from this sort of scarcity
Mm-hmm.
mentality. There's not enough for all of us. I'm going to hold on to what's mine.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's, one of the core things that we're trying to deal with as a society. When you get some sort of vitriolic posts in your feed, aside from kind of turning it around and saying, that's an ugly thing to say, how else do you deal with it, and how would you advise the rest of us
Mm-hmm.
to deal with something like that, specifically within a social media context?
Well, and I think that we have to look at each situation on a case-by-case basis, because it's not always appropriate to say, how ugly. I treat my social media space the same way that I treat my house. If I invite you in my house and you attack someone else in my house unprovoked, you're getting kicked out of my house. So it's not always an opportunity to say, ooh.
Mm-hmm.
But if they're going for someone else on the post and that person didn't do anything to provoke it, they're just being ugly, I will correct them in front of everyone, and I will unfriend them and block them in front of everyone. Because I believe we also have to set standards, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you're in my space, it is my responsibility to protect you, because I've invited you into my space. And so, each situation's a little bit different. Sometimes you can encourage dialogue. Sometimes I'll let people argue it out as long as they're not making personal attacks. I'll just let them go. I don't have to comment, because sometimes people will work it out themselves. You see by the end, they're like, I never thought about that. I never thought about that either.
Mm-hmm.
It took me a while to understand this, but going through corporate America helped a great deal. I always thought that growing up that when someone was in conflict with you, it was an issue of respect, or it was a negative situation. What I've learned is that the way some power dynamics work with some people is that they almost have to bump heads with you, and then after that they respect you. So in corporate America, dealing with some men, I learned that some of them, it was like they were testing me. And then when I'd snap back and correct them, not unprofessional, but just,
You're like, oh, okay, she can handle herself.
then all of a sudden
Yeah.
we're best friends. I was
Yeah.
like, can we just skip all
Can
this?
we-
This is ridiculous.
Is this really necessary?
But it is,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
For some people.
For some people, right.
So again, it's all a little bit different, but go with your gut. And understand that while we don't want to silence people, because there's people that come on my post and their views are so antithetical to everything I believe in, but they're not disrespectful. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Exactly. We can disagree, but we don't have to demonize.
Yeah, and the thing is we don't always have to agree. Disagreement is healthy. If you're ever building a business or a project or anything else, if everyone is of the same mind, that's how we end up with these issues where these corporations are getting into trouble behind creating things that are seen as sexist or racist or whatever you can attach to it, right? Because they have a room full of people that all agree and all have the same perspective. And so you need some level of difference, which produces conflict, because that's what allows you to create in a way where you're considering different perspectives.
I'm curious about how some of the corporations that you are working with that are clients of yours, let's see, how do I want to ask this? So I'm wondering if over the last couple of years, okay, since the 2016 election when the divisions just seemed to go woo,
Right.
okay, if the requests from these corporations when they bring you in to talk about the future, to talk about technology, to talk about social media, how much of the conversation or the requests that they are now making of you are related to where we are as a nation and the conversations that people are not able to have with each other? I'm just curious if that has changed at all in the last couple of years versus previously when you were having these same kinds of conversations with clients.
So I am not being asked to address that specifically.
Okay.
Because most of my clients are corporations and associations. They have very specific issues, challenges, new initiatives that they want my information to plug into, right? Most of them are business related. However, what I have seen is an increased fear of, oh my gosh, whatever you do, don't talk about politics, but not even don't talk about politics. Don't mention a president, don't mention the flag, don't mention an eagle, don't mention an apple.
Seriously.
They're like, just stay away.
Just be neutral.
Which is fine, because typically I am in a presentation anyways, and usually, there's one political joke that I make frequently, but I've never gotten in trouble for it because it actually identifies the dangers of far right and far left on the internet. So I'm kind of going in both directions at one time and showing how once you go too far in either direction, they meet back up in the land of cuckoo cuckoo in terms of what people post, right? And so no one gets mad because they're like, that is true. I'm like, no, there's a point where it in either direction.
Can you share that?
Well, no, that's a piece of it. I can't do it now because I just gave you a piece of it.
Okay,
but
I got you.
So it's along those lines. So
Right.
no one's offended because they're like, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it's all in how you approach it. Plus, personally, while I'm someone who votes every year and I mean every year, so not just in 4-year elections, not just in 2, I'm doing local as well, and I am involved in those things, I'm aware. I'm also someone who doesn't automatically subscribe to any one political ideology. I like to look at the individual, what are they talking about, what is their experience, and so again, my just my personality is helpful in these situations.
Yes.
I didn't create a new person. Like it's me and how I look at things. And so it's helpful.
Interesting. So the clients are saying, don't talk about this, don't mention that, blah, blah, blah. I know you also do a lot of research, obviously, before you go into a specific situation. And part of that research is also talking to the troops.
Right.
Are you hearing anything different from the troops in terms of what their thoughts, feelings, fears are in this current environment?
Well, I think a lot of people are scared of social media because they're afraid of being held accountable for what they say. It's very interesting. People say, oh, well, you can't say anything these days because everyone's so PC. That's interesting, right? Now, I guess that's one way to view it, but the other way to view it is there's a lot of people that have been dumped on for many, many years that are now empowered to say no more. And so is it a question of being PC and being able to get away with just saying anything about anyone? Or is it a question of people who have just eaten a certain amount of poop for so many years saying no more, right?
I've had enough.
You can't make this joke. You can't come at me this way. And so usually you can tell where someone is in the power dynamic on a particular situation based on which viewpoint they take. Are things becoming too PC? Because we typically say that on topics where we're in the upper echelon of power on that particular area.
Yeah. So I want to touch a little bit on your backstory because I don't even know all of your backstory. So, where did you grow up and how did you grow up and what was it in you that led you to this space that you're in right now, that you're clearly so articulate and compassionate and accomplished at? What is it that makes Crystal tick?
I think I've had such a varied background that it helps. So I was born in Gary, Indiana, economically depressed city, right? Very similar to Detroit.
Okay.
And then we moved to Houston, Texas when I was a little girl. I lived in Alief.
Okay.
I was in AP classes, so a good portion of my friends happened to be South and East Asian, right? And so I'm around those cultures a lot. At one point we moved to Atlanta. I was bused as part of a minority to majority program, because the schools in my area were terrible, to an extremely wealthy, all-white school. I think there's maybe about 10 people who were not white. There was, I think, maybe 9 African Americans and one little girl from South Korea, okay? And so being thrown in that world where they all had horses and allowances of over $100 a week in the 90s,
wow.
you know, and just that becoming my, and some of them had never spoken to a black person before. I remember one of them saying on the first day of school, "Hey, do you have any kids?" I said, "What?" And I was 14. I said, "Do you?" And she said, "No, my mom would kill me." And I was like, "Mine too." And her little boyfriend said, "You don't talk like the rest of them." I said, "The rest of who?" And so
wow.
having these, and then I moved back to Houston. I was back in Alief. And so I think having these diverse situations growing up, I got this wonderful window into all these different cultures. And I started to learn that, you know, a lot of people of color we think things are specific to us. But I remember me and my friends in classes cracking jokes about saved butter containers, and the South Indian friend was like, "My mom does that too," and my friend from Hong Kong was like, "Mine too," and then the foil on the stove, it's just all these random, and they start talking about beatings, and we're like, "All of us," and our Caucasian friends were like, "But not me." So, so it's just all of these, I'm not advocating hitting children, let me just say that.
Yes.
But all of these diverse experiences growing up, I think influenced how I see the world, because I saw the poorest to the most wealthy. I saw people from immigrant parents to parents who had come over with the Mayflower. I mean, you see everything, and I think that helps shape us, and I wish everyone had that experience.
I'm so glad that you shared that, because I just feel as though if we had the opportunity to sit across from someone, or just be in an environment, in a group of people, with somebody that is not like us, you know, it doesn't look like us, doesn't pray like us, doesn't love like us, doesn't whatever like us, and have a conversation and find out that, oh, all of our moms saved the butter dish. Oh, all of our moms put foil over whatever on the stove. Oh, you know, there is so much more that we have in common. I just believe that if we could have those kinds of conversations, that it would be a completely different world.
I agree. I think we have to draw a very specific boundary though, right? So I believe that we're more alike than we are unalike. I do not believe in blindness. So when people say I am colorblind, or I don't see religion, or that is dangerous.
Yes, I agree.
Because what happens is if you do not see those distinctions, there are some jokes I can make to someone from East Asia that I can't make from South Asia because of their hurtful history. There's some words that I can use to describe one person and not another. Yes, you can say that a Caucasian child is a silly little monkey. That's okay.
Yeah, you can't say that to an African American.
Right. Or an African,
or
an
African,
Caribbean,
or Caribbean, or
right?
yes.
And so
yes.
seeing color is helpful because it helps you understand what someone's experiences are and what the limitations are. And so I don't believe in blindness, but I do believe in seeing the fact that as humans, we have the same basic concerns.
Such an important point. I completely agree with you on that. So put your futurist hat on for a moment. Okay. What does the future hold first for social media specifically?
So the next generation of social media users, Gen Z, okay, so these are the ones that are teenagers now and the ones after them, they've never had privacy. Now, my generation was the first one that said, we want to be on all the social networks. We're going to treat this like our own reality show. I'm a millennial. I'm an old millennial, but I'm a millennial. The generation after me, I want you to imagine coming out of your mother's womb, which now I think about is a weird thing to ask you to imagine, but imagine that in the moment you're out, there's a camera phone in your face, and someone's uploading you to YouTube and Facebook. And so these children have never had a moniker of privacy.
It's true.
And so what happens is they don't want to be on the Facebooks. They don't want to be on the Twitters. They don't want to connect with the whole world. They want to be on chat-based social networks.
So they have more control.
So they have more control, and they're connecting with the people they actually
That
know.
they want to, yeah.
And so it's going to be much harder to reach them and keep in mind, most of my clients are corporate, so I look at this from a marketing standpoint, because they don't want to be open to the world. They're much more protective of their privacy that they never had. And so I think that's a difference. The other thing is that we have a generation that grew up only knowing globalism. Now, my job is not to judge what that means, but to give some implications. On one hand, it means they're looking at the world holistically. They're familiar with different cultures. On the other hand, that means something very different for nationalism and focus on community if you tend to have an outward focus. So how does that affect organizations that are more locally focused if that's not what they care about as much?
Interesting. Okay, keep that futurist hat on for a moment.
Okay.
And I would like to get your thoughts on what you think the future holds for our country and the lack of civil discourse and trying to reclaim that and getting back to more of a human connection.
So that's a little bit harder for me to get into, only because when you inject humans on that level of human behavior, that's kind of outside my realm on this level, right? But I will say that my suspicion is that I feel like people are starting to get more and more burnt out on social networks where people are arguing about politics. We're also seeing that social networks are starting to shift what you can and can't see in terms of what's popular and what works. We're also starting to see that social networks are being held accountable for inciting things, right? And so I do think we're going to see a shift where maybe politics go through a different filter on social media. Maybe it's not as easy to get your post, your rant, seen by everyone in your friends list. I think we're going to see a cutting down of that, because if we don't, we're going to see an exodus, because people are getting burnt out. It's becoming overwhelming. And the only people that enjoy that argumentation are people that I like to refer to as energy vampires. And there's energy vampires on all areas of the conversation. And then those that are organizing, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse, because you can organize any kind of march or gathering you want, no matter the purpose, if it's kind or unkind.
And it's interesting too, because I'm thinking, okay, so if people are getting burned out on social media, then obviously something else will replace it. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like what you're saying, or what you said earlier, was that what will replace that is the private chats. So people will still have that ability to connect, but literally with people that they really know.
Right. And so the good and the bad of this is, one, you're less stressed out, but two, man, your circle just got smaller, and now it's just reinforcing your worldview. So now you've created a silo.
That presents a whole different set of...
Well, it does, but it doesn't. Here's where things get interesting, because the conversation is silos are bad, right? We keep hearing about that on social media, how it shows you only what you want to see. But years ago, before social media, people had silos. You lived in a neighborhood with people like you for the most part. Now, you could read a paper and get unbiased news. Right now, I call much of what happens in the news newsutainment, and that's from any angle, right? A lot of it's opinion-based, where it's projected as though it would be fact-based, but when you start reading it, you're like, oh, no, this is a definite viewpoint. So, I think that it remains to be seen exactly how this is going to play out, but I think all of us are going to play a huge role in that, because at the end of the day, we are responsible for the energy we put out.
And that leads to my next question, which is, what can we do to be educated consumers of technology and social media?
Well, one of the things I like to do is just listen to opinions that are different than mine, right? And so typically I am not a CNN or even a Fox News watcher. I'm just not typically. But when I'm on airplanes, flying my speaking engagements, I will make myself sit there and sit through 30 minutes of each just to kind of see what's going on. I'll read through their websites from time to time. And it's not about if something's factually true or not, or if there's a slant. It's about realizing that there are people who are going to subscribe to this, what they're being fed wholeheartedly. And I need to know how these people think, because I have to impact these people. I have to interact with these people.
I love it. I love it. there's a website that I have referred to before on the podcast, and I actually just confirmed that the publisher of this organization is going to be a guest on the show.
Wow.
It's called All Sides. The website is allsides.com, and his name is John Gable. And basically you can go to this website and you can look at whatever the news of the day is and see the left perspective, the center perspective, and the right perspective.
Okay.
And you literally can look at the headlines, and you can just read the headline. In fact, I did a speech a couple years ago with some high school students, and I was telling them about this website. And so I just read each of the 3 headlines and asked them to tell me, well, okay, which point of view you think this one is? And they were right. Yeah. They hit it right on the head.
That's amazing.
It is.
It's great also if you watch international news.
Yes.
That's what I tend to prefer. I usually get most of my news about the States.
Yeah.
from news sites outside of the States. And their headlines are completely different.
Their perspective of us, it helps us shine a light on what's really going on.
Right. And they have angles too. So that's not to say you take, but it is all very interesting.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. We all have our own personal bias, our own. I mean, that's what it means to be human. Right. But we have to be able to look beyond that and try to take in all and understand, and then not demonize. That's the other piece of it.
Well, I think there's, again, so let's say we have Facebook, right? Because that's just one that most people are familiar with. It's okay to have people having civil discourse on a particular topic. You might have people that are pro-green, pro-red, pro-purple. What's not okay is for someone to be pro-kill red. Does that make sense? Then I think you do have to take a firm hand,
of
right?
course,
so
of
there's
course.
limits to
absolutely
to this civility, because I hear some people saying, can't we all just get along? Yes, but typically yes, but there's going to be some exceptions where everyone can't be at the table.
You got to call
some
people on it.
are just dangerous.
Sometimes you have to call them on it. Absolutely. What's next for you?
Oh, well, right now I've realized my limitations as a human. I can only get on so many planes a year. And so what I've started doing is committing some of the things that I speak about into online courses. And so that's what I'm in the process of doing now, so that people that need help from me, whether they want to become a speaker or whether they want to learn how to connect better with people in the workplace using technology and grow their careers and sales, I'm putting those platforms in place so that I can still help people without me having to be on a plane to help each of these individual people.
That's wonderful. Well, you talked about the importance of the human connection, and just sitting across from you and being able to look into your beautiful eyes and see that smile and feel your energy is exactly what makes me feel hopeful about our future, because I know there are people like you who are out there doing this kind of work and just being who you are in the world. And the human energy that you bring is really something special. So thank you for sharing that with our audience today. And I learned a lot. I'm still learning a lot about social media, but just the connection, the human connection is the big piece. Is there one thing you'd like to leave with our audience today to help them move in a positive direction in terms of communicating with each other?
Yes. Take a day and turn off your phone. And go spend some time with someone, or read a book, or hug a baby, or donate your time to a community effort that will make a huge impact. Just take some time off.
Done. I'm going to do that for sure. Crystal, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you for taking the time to watch and listen, and for giving our guests permission to speak and having the courage to listen with an open mind. We'll see you next time. I'm a firm believer that if we can find a way to better understand each other's experiences, we can find a way to accept and respect each other for who we are, even when we don't agree. That's the ultimate goal of this podcast. So with that in mind, what do you want the world to know about your story? How might your story, your truth, provide an important perspective to help bridge our divides? If you'd like to share your story with us for a chance to be featured on the podcast, all you have to do is go to our website, ourvoicesmatterpodcast.com, and click on What's Your Story? We can't wait to hear from you, because your voice matters.